Who is the greatest Milwaukee Brewer hitter ever? It comes down to a couple. We'll explain next here on Locked On Brewers.
You are Locked On Brewers, your daily Milwaukee Brewers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Good to have you along. My name is Chuck Freimund, longtime sportscaster here in the state of Wisconsin, proud host of Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network in the entire country. It's because of you great Brewer fans and fans in general of Locked On Sports. Coming up on the show today, who is that greatest hitter of all time? It boils down to a couple. We'll get to that here in a little bit. Joey Ortiz, does he have a future with the Milwaukee Brewers for 2026? We'll explain why he may or may not. Also, do the Brewers really have no impact players on their roster? We'll get to all that coming up here in a little bit. Thanks for joining me. And this episode is brought to you, of course, by FanDuel. FanDuel, you want to be right in the middle of all the action this year? Get into FanDuel. Place your live NFL bets all season long on FanDuel. FanDuel, the #1 sports betting network out there. All right. I get asked too, Chuck, who's the greatest Milwaukee Brewer of all time? Okay, offensively, not pitchers, offensively. I really think it belongs to, you break it down to 5 players, I think, in Brewers history. Robin Yount, Paul Molitor, Ryan Braun, Christian Yelich, and Henry Aaron. People will mention those 5. Okay? Henry Aaron, his jersey's retired. You see it 44 up there, but he played 2 seasons with the Brewers, and his jersey is retired because he's Henry Aaron, but he played at the Milwaukee Braves and Atlanta Braves. He was with the Brewers well after his prime, was not an everyday player, and was in his 40s at the time. So his jersey is retired as a tribute to the Milwaukee Braves and what he did for the city in Milwaukee and all that when he had his great years. All right. He was here for the final 2 years of his career, pretty much was a shell of his terrific Hall of Fame self. Obviously, he's the greatest player ever to wear a Brewer uniform, but he did not have those great years while with the Milwaukee Brewers. Christian Yelich, I thought he was on the fast track to becoming right there with the greats in Milwaukee Brewer history. Obviously, since 2020, that conversation has dwindled off, and he is no longer among the all-time great Milwaukee Brewers. He's going to be always mentioned. Is he ever going to get a statue? No. But he's going to go down in Brewers lore without question. But I think since we've seen his numbers drop dramatically, and I'm telling you, in 2019, I was talking like this guy is going to be the best in Brewers history, right up there with the tippy top guys in Brewers history. But what have you done in the last 5 or 6 years? He's shown us some spurts and all that, maybe this past year, but definitely not in the Hall of Fame category. And he's on that next tier of all-time greats. Ryan Braun. Where do we stand with Ryan Braun? He's on that next tier as well. Braun is not quite in that category with Robin Yount and Paul Molitor. And I've seen it all. I've seen the Brewers. I've seen all these guys play in their prime. Ryan Braun, a great player. As I've mentioned before on podcasts, I'm not going to let the whole scandal cloud how I feel about Ryan, but I feel like he went through a couple of tough years there too, where he wasn't great. But I always thought that Ryan always came through in the clutch in the postseason, though, in big moments. I did. I thought he was a big moment player. But greatest of all time, it boils down to 2 guys. And I'll tell you, when I saw Braun, his rookie year, 1987, obviously batted .324, but 33, 34 home runs. Rookie of the year, he was on a fast track. Got the MVP in 2011. And I felt like 2011, after that, he never was quite the Ryan Braun that he was in his first few years. Okay? Be that as it may. I'm not going to get into it. So, who are the 2 greatest Milwaukee Brewers of all time? it comes down to Paul Molitor and Robin Yount, two guys who played together on the same team, members of the 1982 World Series runner-ups. But I think clearly these two guys are the best hitters in Brewers history, best players in Brewers history, best offensive players in Brewers history. Let's go with Yount, two-time MVP, 1982, 1989. 89, he batted .318. I didn't know if, his numbers, overall numbers when he played with the Brewers, they weren't fantastic. They were good. 1982 was fantastic. 210 hits, batted .331, 29 home runs. Yount never did hit 30 home runs. In fact, Yount he came into the league in 1974 as an 18-year-old. All right. And it wasn't until 1980 that he had his first double-digit home run totals. Now, you look from 74 through 79, and home runs aren't everything, because I could say the same thing with Molitor. But when Yount first came in, 3, 8, 2, 4, 9, 8, those were his home run totals over his first 6 years. And the story goes that one of the veterans on the team said, Robin, you got warning track. These are teased about having warning track power. And he went into the offseason and he lifted weights. This is well before the time of weightlifting. Weightlifting probably was the mid-'80s when weightlifting became a thing in Major League Baseball. But he started like in 1980. He went and lifted weights in the offseason. And he went from a guy hitting single digits, 8 or 9 or 7 home runs a season, to a guy who hit 23 in 1980. 1981, he hit 10, but that's a strike season. But then in 82, hit 29 home runs, 331, and without question, the greatest player in the game. Shortstop, you name it. Robin was the man. That was his greatest year ever. He had other good years. Like I said, 1989, 89, he batted .318 with 19 home runs. Now, you look at those numbers, not exactly great numbers. And the Brewers were somewhat in the contention, but I don't think there was any really strong MVP candidates in 89. Robin Yount, MVP at 2 different positions, 3,000 hits, played his entire 20 seasons in Major League Baseball with the Milwaukee Brewers, lifetime batting average of .285. Jersey retired, lifelong Brewer. I think that's what we remember. Think about Robin, because we go between Robin and Molitor. Well, Robin stayed here his entire career. Molitor played here for only the first not only, but the first 15 years of his career. All right. Yount had a great year, great career, a great year in 82, 2-time MVP. But I feel like the greatest Milwaukee Brewer is Paul Molitor, number 4. Never won an MVP here, but Molitor, man, he did some special things. This guy is not only, I think, the greatest hitter in Brewers history, but he's considered one of the all-time great hitters in Major League Baseball history. Just his plate discipline at the plate. The story goes with Molitor that he had such a master's degree at the plate for a ball and a strike that he would sometimes foul off a pitch when it was behind him. He'd be behind him nearly in the catcher's mitt, and he'd get a bat on it to stay alive in the count. That's how good he was. That's how good he was with the bat and how great he was. When you think of Paul Molitor, what do you think of? The 1987 39-game hitting streak. Molitor, it was amazing. That earlier that year, during that same hitting streak, he broke the Brewer record, I think, for 25, Davey Mays record for the Brewers hitting streak of 25 games. But he kept on going. The beat goes on, as the saying was in 1987. And he had this hitting streak going. And suddenly, for the first time since the World Series, people began noticing the Milwaukee Brewers once again. The Brewers had some decent teams, but the national media came to Milwaukee. They were following Paul Molitor's hitting streak. Nightline was there. This is when cable was just starting its ascension with ESPN and all that. ESPN was there. It was a big deal. Now, again, not all Brewer home games were on TV. No Brewer home games were on TV. So with this hitting streak, you had to follow it by either going to the game if they were at home or listening to it on the radio. But he was terrific the way he handled himself. The Brewers loved the fact that if there was anybody who could handle himself and handle the media and handle the pressure of a hitting streak, and the Brewers were in the pennant race too, it was Paul Molitor. He was just amazing. And I'll remember the night, mid-August, the Brewers were on their way to potentially extra innings. Bottom of the ninth inning, Paul Molitor was on deck. Man at third, Mike Felder. 2 outs, and Manning got a base hit up the middle. And Felder walked in from third, reluctantly touched home plate, and Molitor ran out and greeted Manning. Now, meantime, the Brewers had just won this ball game, but it was probably the first time in sports history that a sports team was booed for winning a game, because the fans wanted to see Molitor extend that hitting streak and make a run at Joe DiMaggio's 56-gamer, which still stands. Molitor was on deck. Manning hits the RBI base hit up the middle, and the whole crowd just sunks because they wanted Molitor to have another crack. He was 0 for 4, and they wanted to see him and have another crack at it. And there he was. Who was the first one to go out and greet Manning? Paul Molitor. Ran from the on-deck circle out to first base. Manning said, "Paulie, I'm sorry. Molitor's first word, you have nothing to be sorry for. We won the ball game." And that's the kind of guy Paul Molitor was. And you know what? If Robin Yount was in his shoes, that's the kind of guy Robin Yount was. Those are two guys who cared more about their team than about themselves. Now, Molitor got an unfair rap. Number one is, he was injured. The injury started to pile up with him. And in 87, he was a DH with the Brewers. And that led to 1992, because most of it, he was DHing from 87 to 92. But you had this guy who was the DH, who was the best hitter in baseball, or one of the best hitters in baseball. But when 92 came, the Brewers lowballed him on a contract using the DH as an excuse to give him a lower. They were going to ask him to take a pay cut. So I remember December of, I think it was December 6th or December 5th of 1992, winter of 92. I was working at a radio station in Eau Claire. The night before, I'm watching the news on channel 13 up in Eau Claire. My guy, Bob Brainerd, and he said, "Yep, we just got news that the Brewers have offered Molitor, it was salary arbitration or whatever it was. They had to offer him some sort of deal." So that was at 10 o'clock at night. I get into the radio station at 4 a.m. The overnight disc jockey who was playing music back then, they had overnight people, live bodies in there. She came out to dump out the garbage. And she goes, "Hey, did you hear Molitor signed with the Blue Jays?" And I was half asleep walking into the studio. I'm like, what? I came in to do my sportscast. I could not believe it. Not only that Molitor was no longer going to be a Milwaukee Brewer after 15 years, it's someone who I'd grown up watching and covering, but that he was signing with the rival Blue Jays, because the Brewers and the Blue Jays were in the same division at the time, the American League East. Could not believe it. Could not believe it. And I just went into the studio and just sat there. I could not believe it. And this is the days when the news would come over a wire. There was no internet back then. News would come over an AP wire. And sure enough, she had it all ripped there. Paul Molitor has signed a 3-year deal, 3 or 4 year deal, whatever it was. I think it was 3, 4 maybe, with the Blue Jays, 1992. Oh. And even if they kept Molitor, it wasn't like they were going to be contenders over the next few years anyway, because the salaries began to get out of whack. But the Brewers asked Molitor, when salaries started escalating, to take a pay cut. Imagine that. One of the best hitters in baseball. But he was good. I mean, he played some outfield. He played some third base. He came up as a shortstop originally in 1978 when Yount was holding out for a contract and better contract. And they brought Molitor up, and he played short. And then when Yount eventually rejoined the team. Molitor moved to second. So you had Molitor and Yount as a double play combination. Two future Hall of Famers there. But Molitor could do anything. Again, I think he was plagued a lot with that injury. A lot of injuries took its toll. Still 3,000 hits, won a World Series with the Blue Jays. But I think Paul Molitor is the greatest Milwaukee Brewer of all time. He will never go down as the greatest in some people's book. I think overall, if you ask the general fan out there, if I ask you, who is the greatest Milwaukee Brewer of all time? Majority, you would say Robin Yount. And I think some of you guys might hold Molitor leaving, because when Molitor came back as a member of the Blue Jays, he was booed for the first few years coming back. And that upset Molitor, because we interviewed Molitor in the locker room afterwards, and he was upset. He was upset, but he wore his Brewer hat and into the Hall of Fame as a Brewer, despite all that. Always, again, when he came back as the manager of the Twins, just always is Molitor, just so eloquent, handles himself, smart guy. I always thought maybe he'd come back and be the Brewers manager. And Robin Yount, great ambassador. Two guys, smart ball players, high baseball IQ. And man, it was just to watch these guys growing up as a kid and later on covering these guys. But I would say Molitor and Yount are up here. And if you're listening on the podcast, I got my hands pointed upwards. And then Braun, and then Yelich. Braun in that next tier, and then the Yelich the next tier after that. And Henry Aaron, we can't count because he joined the Milwaukee Brewers when he was past his prime for the final 2 years of his career. But Paul Molitor, without question, greatest hitter in Brewers history. All right. We come back. What happens with Joey Ortiz? Some of you guys don't want him back. I don't know if the Brewers want him back. They're saying all the right things. We'll get to that next here on Locked On Brewers. Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. This episode brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Fridays already feel different during the basketball season, and FanDuel making them even better every Friday night. Before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with the NBA Happy Hour, your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app right before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern Standard Time have become an appointment viewing with the NBA Happy Hour. Open up the FanDuel app during the Happy Hour and always bring something new. Boosts, bonuses, surprise. The timing is perfect right before games, right before the weekend starts. Extra energy to Friday night basketball in the NBA right at your fingertips with FanDuel. So before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app. See what's dropping during the NBA Happy Hour every Friday, 6 to 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. Little basketball, little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel. FanDuel, the official sports book partner of the NBA. And I tell you all the time, man, how I love their live betting. Chuck Freimund, Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen to every day here on Locked On Brewers. And you get us on Google, Spotify, Apple. We're on all the major downloads. And, of course, our growing YouTube page. Search Locked On Brewers. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell. That alerts you every time we drop an episode here on Locked On Brewers. I'm going to tell you about the special offer that we got coming up. The new club, the Everydayers Club. All that coming up here in a little bit. Joey Ortiz. Joey Ortiz was one of the worst hitters. Now we're going from great hitters. Now at shortstop, Joey Hitters was one of the worst hitters in Major League Baseball this past year. In fact, the research I did, I checked out MLB.com. Out of 232 hitters of at least 500 at-bats, of their last 500 at-bats, he is 228th. He's the fourth worst hitter in baseball of regular players with 500 at-bats, their last 500 at-bats. Now, every time he makes a defensive play, I forget all about the bases loaded jam he left us in, or tapping out weakly to second base to finish out the inning, or what he does among the best in Major League Baseball, and the stats will show this, a pop-out. Yeah, Joey's among the league leaders in pop-outs in baseball. So, yeah, the numbers, the offensive numbers are putrid for Joey Ortiz. But when he comes back and makes that sliding catch behind the second base bag and throws the first and saves a run, or makes a diving stop into the third base hole between short and third and throws the runner at first base, man, I forget all about that stuff. They got, man, Joey Ortiz is the man. How is he not up for a Golden Glove? But can the Brewers, and they've said this on the telecast, that, well, Joey's numbers aren't great, but every time he makes a defensive stop, that's why he's in there, and that's why he would not be a major leaguer if he did not field his position as greatly as he does. And he's amazing. His defense has saved him a spot on the major league roster. Murphy said this recently, says, I think he's still going to be a really good offensive player. Now, I don't know if they're sugarcoating stuff right there, trying to prop him up, because he might be one of those guys that they want to trade here in the offseason. I have a feeling that he's not going to be the long-term solution at shortstop. I've told you guys that for a long time. But the Brewers are saying all the right things about Joey Ortiz being the shortstop. They like him. They want him to be better offensively, but defensively, A++ at the shortstop position. On a team that's looking for offense, and I get it. I mean, just amazing at shortstop. But can you live with Ortiz being one of the worst hitters in baseball, especially, and another thing, which I didn't write here, he's one of the worst hitters in baseball with bases loaded. Now, he hit the grand slam against the Mets, but I think he was like 2 of 23 he was always coming up with bases loaded. It feels too, setting himself up for failure. So it felt like he was always coming up in that spot, but more often than not, he did not come through in those situations. But I don't think the Brewers need to live this way. Yes, great defensively, but I do feel like they need to move Turang over to shortstop. They need to move Turang to shortstop, Durbin in the second, and the shortstop, or the third base spot. Well, I wanted them to make a trade here in the offseason for a third baseman. Of course, they're not going to sign anybody. Didn't want Suarez. I didn't. But I think that eventually, as I said, Ortiz, I think, is going to be the odd man out here, with Turang eventually being the second baseman. And somebody always say, boy, the second baseman, Turang always being the shortstop. They tried Turang out at shortstop spring training last year, and he injured his arm. Does he have a strong enough arm? I think he's going to be just fine at shortstop. Turang, I feel like he's one of those guys you can play at any, but you probably put him at catcher, and he's going to find a way to figure it out. That's how good Turang is. All right. The Brewers have no impact. What's this I read? The Brewers have no impact players? How are they winning 97 games? We'll get to that coming up next here on Locked On Brewers. Want to tell you about the Everydayer Club, everybody. We just started this. Thanks for making Locked On Brewers your first listen to every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network in the entire world. Right now, you get ad-free audio on Locked On Brewers, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. I know a lot of you guys have been asking for this. How can you watch the podcast without the ads? Well, this is the way to do it. Join the Everydayer Club. Everydayer Club. If you haven't looked at it already, checked it out. I have a link right in the notes below here and how you can join the Everyday Club. Locked On Brewers is always going to be free. On podcast downloads, on YouTube, it's always going to be free. But your chance to get audio free, also part of the Everydayer Club Discord server, and other amenities as well. But check it out. Go to the notes section and check out how you can be a part of the Everydayer Club with Locked On Brewers. All right. So this year, every day, I spend about 2.5 hours reading baseball stories, not just about the Milwaukee Brewers, but throughout Major League Baseball. You got to be up on it. I cover the Brewers. I try to be up on other teams as well. And there was an article I saw, 10 players who will define 2026, not Brewers, 10 major leaguers in general who will define 2026. All right, 10 players. Elliot Cruz of the Reds, Vladimir Guerrero, Bryce Harper, Aaron Judge, Shohei, Julio Rodriguez, Paul Skeens, Skubal, Soto, the Mets, Kyle Tucker. Those will define 2026. Obviously, they don't feel anybody in the Milwaukee Brewers is better than any of those guys. Brewers have no impact players. So I mean, that's good and bad. How are the Brewers winning division titles when they have no impact players, basically? No major. Won 97 games. I think if you look back in baseball history, the team that won the most games during the regular season, most teams would have someone make an all-time most impactful player list of that season. The Brewers had none. Pretty incredible, right? Bryce Turang should have got more votes, I thought, for MVP. But the Brewers do not have anybody listed on MLB.com as top 10 players who will define the 2026 season. In other words, the Brewers are doing it with just a bunch of guys. I don't know. Still finding a way to get the job done, but the Brewers do need an impact player. I don't know if it still sits in the minors. Did a great episode with Dan Zielinski last week. Check it out. We talk about the minor leagues and how the Brewers got all these hot prospects, mostly in the infield. But it was a really cool segment. But as of right now, Brewers have no impact players. No players who will define 2026. I'd like to put Bryce Turang in that. Maybe Jackson Chourio. I'd like to see him take that next step up this year and see if next year we cannot get somebody who will define the 2027 season. Because obviously Major League Baseball feels so little of the Brewers, not one guy could crack this list. All right, that's going to do it. Have yourself a great Monday, everybody. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. I'm trying to get a guest here in the next couple of days as well. And, nothing's news with the Milwaukee Brewers these days. It is quiet on the home front with the Milwaukee Brewers. I drive by AmFam Field a lot, look at it, and it's Wisconsin winter, and there's a couple of cars in the parking lot. So, there's work being done in there, but nothing is, no news is happening so far, really, of a major state with the Milwaukee Brewers, one trade. We'll talk to everybody tomorrow, everybody. And again, check out the Everydayer Club in the notes section below here. My name is Chuck Freimund. Thanks for making us your number one listen every day and number one view every day on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day.